Okay, good morning again, everybody. And so today is kind of a new phase in this thing. This is session number 20. We started last summer, I think. Uh, and we've gone through the autobiography of St. Ignatius, and we've gone through the spiritual exercises to some degree. And at the end, we focused for a while on the contemplation to experience divine love. And then we started into the rules for discernment. And today we're starting into this book, um, God's Voice Within by Mark Thibodeaux. And I'm gonna in the next we're gonna meet next Sunday, skip a Sunday, and then the Sunday after that we'll meet again. And I'm hoping we'll get through parts 1 and 2 and 3 of this book. So this book, he starts off by distinguishing the states of consolation and desolation, which is what we will be doing this morning, I hope. And then he moves into how to respond once you understand you're experiencing desolation or consolation. What do you do? And he makes these suggestions. And what I love about this is that when you're in desolation, he gives 8 primary suggestions, and they're all things that you and I are already doing as a result of our participation in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. They're right a product of what we do. Um, when you're in consolation, he gives you 4 things to do, and all 4 of them are largely get ready for the next desolation, which I totally love. Rather than, you know, cheer us on, be a cheerleader for your relationship with God, he says, get this is up and down. We go in and out of this thing, and I find for me that's so valuable to understand. We flip flop between um, the failure of our self reliance. You know, the book says this startling thing that the reason we fear is because of the failure of our self reliance. And the reason we self rely is because we don't have a working relationship with God. We've got a relationship with God, whether you want it or not. The question is, how is that relationship working for you, and how sensitive to it are you? So, so anyway, I'm going to go into this part 1, and going to do it a little bit differently than the book, but going to start by looking at the book, and he talks about has this first section of why read this book, and he just running through everything in general, um, that about this process and the things that we do. I'm on page 1, and he talks about ordinary daily decisions. How do you fill up your day? How might you serve Christ? How might you take good care of yourself? How do you relate to others? What sort of attitude do you want to carry? These are big deals, and on a daily basis. Then there are other times when it's a more serious decision. I'm over to page 4. Big decisions. You look back on your life, see momentous choices. Break up or marry, stay in your hometown or move, pursue this career or that one, choice to have this many children, blah, blah, blah. These different choices that we make that are a bigger deal than ordinary day to day stuff. And when we get to the part 3, part 1 is defining them, part 2 is responding to desolation and consolation, part 3 is using the rules for discernment to make your decisions. Um, then I've already turned to page 9, and I just wanted to skim read this. I thought this was a great summary of Ignatius's life, which we did do before, earlier in these sessions, but not this particular summary. So I'm going to skim read to you. It starts with on page 9 with how did Ignatius' spirituality get started? What was his first inkling of what we're going through here? It all starts with a cannonball, and then here's the story. So Ignatius de Loyola was born into a noble family, Basque region of Spain, 1491. Upbringing full of stuff of medieval court life, gallant battles, alluring women, shining armor, all important honor, sword fights, card games, and look at this, and lots of alcohol. Not a great start for a saint. He was known for his tremendous passion and zeal, but he squandered it on selfish pursuits and petty, doomed battles. 1521, he's trying to keep his soldiers from keep fighting against the French who are trying to take over Pamplona, gets hit with a cannonball, winds up back in the castle, and then it says in his boredom, he asked for novels about romance and noble warfare, only two books, one on the lives of the saints and the other on the life of Christ. So now he's laying in bed, long, lonely hours in bed, found himself in deep revelry of daydreams. Sometimes he would dream of himself heroic nobleman, fighting important battles, winning the hand of a lady of high nobility, holding prestigious positions in a mighty kingdom. And other times, with these religious books, he's imagining himself as the new St. Francis, we know that name, or new St. Dominic, fighting battles against the Prince of Evil, pledging undying loyalty to the Heavenly Lord, asking Mary, the Mother of Christ, to be his queen. So then the important part. So you can imagine this guy laying there in pain, but he distracting him. He doesn't have TV, of course, distracting himself with one of these two things: the court life, the nobility, the battles, the alcohol, the women, all that stuff, or the other one, the religious life. Um, then one day he had an epiphany. He noticed an important distinction between the way he felt after his chivalric dreams and the way he felt after dreaming a religious life. Referring to himself in the third person, describes this extraordinary moment of insight. So now what they're doing is they're switching to what's called his autobiography. It's written in the third person. He's dictating it to this other Jesuit monk before his death, a couple of years before his death, and so these are his words, even though he's talking in the third person. There was this difference, however. When he thought of worldly matters, he found much delight. But after growing weary and dismissing them, he found that he was dry and unhappy. We could read restless, irritable, discontent. But when he thought of imitating the saints in all the austerities they practiced, he not only found consolation, but even after they had left him, he remained happy and joyful. He did not consider, nor did he stop to examine the difference until one day his eyes were partially opened and he began to wonder at this difference and to reflect upon it. From experience, he knew that some thoughts left him sad while others made him happy, and little by little, he came to perceive the different spirits that were moving him, one coming from the devil and the other coming from God. So this has had a positive effect for me because I've been on a tear all my life to try to feel better than I feel. I have um, always been plagued by the big questions. What's this all about? How did I get here? What am I supposed to do while I'm here? And what's going to happen when I die? But the one that I think bothered me the most was, why can't I feel better than I do? Being aware that all of our lives are truly miracles happening right here, right now. And yet I've spent most of my time until coming into AA feeling rotten, not knowing why, and trying to medicate myself, trying to acquire things that I thought would make me happy, maintain relationships, whatever. But the goal was to feel better than I did. And of course, it doesn't work because I'm running on self reliance. I'm listening to this thing tell me what to do to make it feel better. And it's never satisfied. I do what it tells me. I get the thing or the relationship or the money or the whatever. And within 5 or 10 minutes, it's back to being restless, irritable, and discontent. And I'm going, what? I don't get it. And so then little by slow, as we like to say, and I love that, I started to understand the immensity of the promise. We read it. I got to read it, the last reading, just to the extent that I work on this relationship. I humbly rely with my Creator, just to the extent. And I try to live the life my Creator wants to live, not Jack's ego, but my Creator wants to live. I will get the power, because lack of power is always the dilemma. I can think it. I can think I want to feel good. I can think I want to feel serenity. I can think I want to do God's will for me, even. And I can't do it. I don't have the power. And we get the power through this relationship. And yet, this relationship with higher power is the biggest stumbling block for everybody in AA that I've met. So maybe I've met a couple of people who've always had a working relationship with God, and it's been easier for them. But most of us, we understand it, we understand the idea, we understand the literature, and yet if you say, are you feeling the presence of God right here, right now, you're going to get no, or maybe. um, and it goes in and out for me for sure. But I love this idea of, instead of me seeking something, what I'm seeking is to uh, humbly rely on God and to try to live the life God wants me to live, which in our book says we ask God to mold our ideals and help us live up to them. And to me, it's so much more profound than I thought of it when first reading it. It's in the instructions on the sex conduct inventory, and it has a lot more feeling for me than praying only for knowledge of God's will for me and the power to carry that out. That's just a little bit more, it's less feeling. Mold my ideals and help me live up to them. I want to live the life you want me to live. Now, it turns out that the third step prayer is saying this very thing in the third line. Take away my difficulties, that my victory over these difficulties is going to demonstrate your power, your love, and your way of life. It's a huge statement. I'm not trying to express my own personal power. I'm trying to let whatever it is, the power of peace, love, and joy, the power of God, express itself through me. Big book, page 49, in its own way, says right in the middle of the page, you've only got two alternatives. One is believe your own thinking and act on your own thinking and follow your own thinking, or ask to be an agent of your Creator. Live in an agency where you're asking your Creator, what do you want me to do? I mean, it tells you, 49, page 49, we agnostics, that it will be vain if I simply pursue my self-reliance. It won't work out in the end. So at any rate, so I'm back looking at the end of his story, and I'm going to add a dimension here because it's been important for me. I've never been able to um, relate to a negative power called the devil or called evil. Um, but all I have to do is switch it to my self-centered human nature, my self-obsessed, self-centered. We got a old timer. She's 53 years of sobriety. I think she's 83, so she got sober at 30. And she says, my life may not look like very much to you, but I'm all I ever think about. And I just love that, and she's joking because that's not all she ever thinks about. She's been around long enough to, but but it's the truth. This thing here, if I leave it to what it wants to do, it's going to think about itself and try to get me to do all the stuff to make it happy. And I'm telling you, the failure of self-reliance means to me it's never done, it's never lasted. And why I love that St. Ignatius notices he dreams of noble deeds and winning the hand of a noble lady and victory and all this stuff. And he feels good temporarily. And when he thinks about living a spiritual life and following the example of these saints, it lasts longer. So at this last, little by little, he came to perceive different spirits moving him, one coming from the devil. So I'm just saying the human being, and the other coming from God as God expresses itself through the soul. And then you wind up pretty quickly getting it. For me, it's gotten clearer and clearer. My human self, my ego personality, wants fundamentally three things: self-preservation, self-gratification, self-justification, justifying my self-centered point of view. That's what it wants. Um, the soul, on the other hand, is on an entirely, that first reading that we do, your life has been given you mainly for your human life has been given you mainly for the purpose of training your spiritual soul. I am not a human being seeking a spiritual experience. I am a spiritual being, a soul, having a human experience and trying to learn and grow as a soul. Emmett Fox says the soul, that your entire human life, this time, whether you live 50, 60, 70, 80 years, is one day in the life of your soul. I'm close to 80. 80 times 300 is 24,000. Means my soul has been here and having a human experience 24,000 times. That's those are pretty big numbers, and makes this particular life seem much less significant. And look what the rest. This is from the 24-hour day book, June 8th. Purpose of training your soul, life we live is not so much for the body. Now that's the self-centered human ego. And that's what I think, what Ignatius is saying. You do that and you're going to wind up stuck in desolation. We often choose what best suits the body. Yes, of course. That's what's most obvious. I'm a student of something called A Course in Miracles, and it says the ego always speaks first. It speaks loudest, and it's just like Jim the car salesman. Suddenly the thought crossed my mind: if I put whiskey into milk and drink it on a full stomach, everything's going to be dandy. It's the second story and more about alcoholism. I vaguely sensed I wasn't being any too smart. That's his spiritual, that's the voice of the soul saying, "Oh, Jim, please, no, don't, ego, whiskey and milk, great idea." And what's the book say? Thus started one more trip to the asylum. It just never works out. Any rate, okay, so then I want to read. I'm back on God's Voice Within, page. I don't know what. I don't know what page it is. Um, the after the statement from the autobiography, I can tell you. Hold on. Okay, we were on 9 and then 10. I think I'm on 10 of God's Voice Within. This recognition of the difference between the two spirits that moved him became the foundation of Ignatius's lifelong exploration of how a person discerns God's will. Now, I'm not saying the book says this clearly. The big book says this clearly. I don't think it does, but I'm expressing this as the truth of my experience anyway. We do steps 1 through 9 to get to steps 10, 11, and 12 on a constant basis. If you hear somebody say, I did the steps 3 times. We don't do the steps. You do steps 1 through 9, whatever number of times it takes to get what we call conscious contact, which is also a spiritual awakening, which is also being able to hear the voice of the soul with its entirely different agenda than the human ego's agenda. Um, we do 1 through 9 to get into this relationship, and 10, 11, and 12 are about living in relationship with higher power. People break it down to 4 words: pause, ask and listen, do. The pause is step 10. That's where we're stepping back from what's going on, looking at our lack of power over our response, over our resentment, over our fear, over our sense of remorse, our lack of power over that. Um, and then we're running through the 10-step protocol. Pray at once for removal, share with somebody, make amends if called for. That's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then turn your mind to service, which is step 12. And start working on the question, God, what do you want me to do here? How can I best serve you? Not how can I serve you? How can I best serve you? Which ties right into the Jesuits talking. They call it for the greater glory of God. Well, fine, but I do better when I'm going, how can I best serve you? Means more to me than greater glory of God. Not to discount it. Okay. This recognition of the difference between the two spirits, lifelong exploration of how to discern God's will, that is the purpose of step 11, to discern God's will for me. So I can humbly rely on God and try to live the life I think God wants me to live, not the life Jack wants me to live. I've got my life. and it's wonderful right now. It's as good as it's ever been. But it's more because I'm hell bent on this stuff, and trying to incorporate it into how I'm living. Um, so this recognition, he came to believe that God, in infinite love and compassion for us, is at all times stirring our hearts with desires to do great deeds of life and love. um, you may remember Carl Jung, who plays a vital part in our program. If Carl Jung hadn't said to Roland Hazard, nope, I've never succeeded with a drunk like you, you need a spiritual experience, he wouldn't have gone to New York City, wouldn't have gone to the Oxford groups, wouldn't have gotten sober, wouldn't have gotten Ebby sober, and Ebby wouldn't have gotten to Bill. Carl Jung had this sign over his door that said in Latin, bidden or unbidden, God is present. Probably the finest psychiatrist in the world, saying as you walk through the door for your therapy session, whether you acknowledge it or not, God is present. What Ignatius is saying, God is present at all times in your heart, begging you to live this finer life, not a life of self-centered, obsessive, self-centered selfishness, but a life of trying to serve God, which is what I think step 10 says at the end of it. Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. I mean, you can't be any clearer than that. All of our activities, how can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which must, M-U-S-T, not suggested, must go with us constantly. This is the proper use of the human will. Is anything about that not clear? The problem is, for me anyway, is that most of it is theoretical in my brain and not in my physical, emotional experience. Until I get some kind of conscious contact where all of a sudden the God thing, instead of being theory, becomes real. Our book says the spiritual life is not a theory. We got to live it. But when you're stuck in here, when you're stuck addicted to your own self-reliance, I think and powerless over your own self-reliance, how are you going to have a relationship with higher power? There's no room. There's no room in the inn. This is so full of stuff. That's the beauty of our steps 4 through 9. It's getting rid of the stuff. Although we have to pray. None of us give it how it works. Say some of us tried to hold on to our old ideas and the results were nil till we let go absolutely. I used to hear that and I go, I'm not only not willing to let go of them, I'm trying to prove they work. I'm trying to prove they're good ideas and they're making my life a better life. I lack power over my own self-reliant thinking. And part of the being relieved of that is by praying for its removal. The prayer for removal is a vital part of our whole deal. Relieve me of the bondage of self. Relieve me of my self-reliant, my addicted self-reliant thinking. Relieve me of my human ego. Ooh. It's any rate, that's our secret ingredient. And I haven't found that in Buddhism. I haven't found it. Well, it's sort of in A Course in Miracles, and the gentler form of that thing, we don't say it, but it's called the set aside prayer, which doesn't say cut my head off the way, relieve me of the bondage, just, take my head off. It says, please set aside. Just set it aside. That's not quite so threatening to our self-concept. Set aside everything I think I know about myself, about my disease, about Alcoholics Anonymous, about you. Uh, please set aside everything I think I know so I can have an open mind and a new experience. Dude, that'd be nice. An open mind and a new because otherwise I'm just going to keep experiencing what this thing is telling me about my life. It just keeps, and that's insanity. That's our insanity, is allowing my thinking to perpetuate itself and go on. And I keep doing the same thing. The hard part for me, I'm in here 10 years and doing pretty good and working pretty hard. And all of a sudden I hit desolation. None of it was new feeling wise. None of it was new, which annoyed me tremendously. I would have loved if I could say, well, this is new. I haven't felt this before. What's up? What's going on here? None of it was new. All of the feelings, the negative, the self-condemnation, the critical part, it was stuff I'd been hearing all my life out of this thing. Um, uh, any rate, so and I believe that was a battle going on between my human nature and my spiritual. And I'm actually coming to believe that my human ego got jealous of me trying to live in relationship with God. And any rate, okay, I'm kind of off. Okay, he came to believe that God, in infinite compassion for us, is at all times stirring our hearts and desires to do great deeds of life and love, while another spirit, the ego, leads us to lower dreams and moves us to act against the life-giving inspirations of God. I'll remind you, Emmett Fox says, if you're serious about spiritual work, you need two spirations, inspiration and perspiration, which I love. He's saying you need to feel inspired, but then you also got to do some work. And I think our book says that we need understanding or faith, that's the inspiration, And then we need work, action. That's the perspiration. So he's saying this inspiration is there all the time. The problem is we're distracted by the focus that this self-reliant brain's got going on. Ignatius discovered that if a person could simply discern between these two spirits, the one pulling toward life, substitute God, the one pulling toward God, and the other pulling away from God or toward separate self. You know, that's the two voices. One saying, me, pay attention to me, please. I need to feel better about this. I don't like that. I want this. Fear and desire. Um, and the other is toward God and God's wishes for our life. So let's see. He noticed that the pull toward the good or toward God had distinctive characteristics that reveal God, its ultimate source. The pull away from God, too, has distinctive characteristics. The more a person can detect these characteristics, the easier it is to recognize and follow the true spirit toward a life in God. That was on pages 9 and 10 of God's Voice Within. So now we're going to flip. We're going to go, because I'm already running out of time here, going to go to in the book God's Voice Within. It's on page 57. And this is the end of his section on his descriptions of consolation. He does desolation first, but this morning, we're going to do consolation and compare it to its opposite, which is desolation. So on page 57, there's this little chart, figure 1, and it says desolation and consolation side by side. And what we're going to focus on is uh, the right side. I am in consolation when I have, and then it says faith, hope, love, the sense of God's closeness, peace and tranquility, great desires, and transparency. So I'm going to run through those this morning, and by the way, talk about their opposite, which is going to be desolation. And you can see I'm in consolation when I feel, and he actually uses the word increase, which is like improve conscious contact. When I feel faith, hope, and love. And I'm in desolation when what I feel is doubt and fear and despair. Um, so right away, that's telling me, doubt and fear and despair. That's restless, irritable discontent, where most of us start out this whole thing. So faith, hope, and love. Then the sense of God's closeness. Um, and there's a whole book called Practicing the Presence of God, another ancient spiritual text. Well, that's huge. The sense of God's closeness, and then these um, feelings of peace and tranquility versus the disquietude and agitation. He uses these old words, so you gotta. It's important, I think, to bring them to words that make sense for me. Disquietude and agitation. And then he says great desires, and the other side of that is fear and worry. He says transparency, which I believe in our work means honest, open, and willing. That I'm not trying to keep anything secret. Where in desolation, it's secrecy. So I'm going to start into faith, hope, and love, and see how far we get before we stop. And Ali, I see you there, and I know you're taking off but thank you for coming, and I hope to see you soon. Okay, so now we're going to in the book God's Voice Within. We're going to page 45, which is the first of these positive characteristics um, of consolation, faith, hope, and love. And I'm trying to do it this way because so often uh, I think you can understand the definition of a word by looking at its opposite. right? Is instead of trying to understand the, like the one, if the promise that means the most to me is if I will humbly rely on God, and if I will try to live the life God wants me to live, I will get the power to be part of the calamity, which has never ended, never stopped. It seems to get worse or better at different times, but we've been beaten up on each other for thousands of years. The drugs are a lot stronger and the weapons are a lot more destructive, but the fundamental human challenge hasn't really changed. Um, I will get the power, if I can humbly rely on God, I will get the power to be part of the calamity, and yet I'm going to feel okay. I can't do it all the time, um, but I will be okay. I will have a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one, is what the book says. I wish he'd just put a period at I will have a kindly and tolerant view, period. Okay, sounds good. But then he's got to go of each and every. You mean Vladimir Putin? I'm supposed to have a kindly and tolerant view toward Vladimir Putin? That's going a little far, but that's what it says. That I think if I'm more identified with my spiritual reality than my human reality, and I know my spirit has been here before and will be here again. My spirit's not going to die when my body and mind dies. The Ignatian, the whole thing about it, well, we read it. It doesn't matter if you have a long life or a short life, a rich life or a poor life, a healthy life or a sick life, an honored life or a dishonored life. That doesn't matter. WTF, are you kidding me? What do you mean that doesn't matter? That's all that matters to most of us. But he's saying if you can get identified with this, your soul, rather than your body and your mind, and start trying to pay attention, ask the question, why is my soul here? What I love about this book, when we're going to get to next, its subtitle is, What on Earth Am I Here For? Why am I here? My ego's got very clear answers. It wants to feel good all the time and get what it wants. What on earth am I here for? Is there a higher calling? They're going to talk a lot about. So, at any rate, number one, faith, hope, and love. Opposite of faith is doubt. When they get intense, they're called scruples. And it's where can experiencing a paralyzing doubt about what I'm supposed to do, as opposed to this feeling of certainty, understanding what I'm supposed to do. And that's where I think primary purpose is so important. And I am eager to get to uh, what primary purpose is. This thing posits, I can't, posits five primary purposes. One, I am here to express my Creator's love of creation. I am here to love creation. Actually, number two is to be part of a fellowship, which is love thy neighbor. Commandment number one, love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind. Commandment number two, you do that by loving your neighbor. They're not two. The way I love God is by loving God's creation. Um, Number three in this book is to grow along spiritual lines. That's how it works. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. That's the whole point. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. That's awesome. It means I don't have to be bothered when I'm obviously a self-centered, selfish, self-obsessed human being. I'm not a saint, but I'm willing to try. And I try through prayer. Please set aside my self-centered selfishness, so I can better do thy will. Um, so primary purpose number 3 of 5 is to grow along spiritual lines. Number 4, they call ministry, which is where am I going to serve? What aspect of the world am I going to plug into in terms of service? And number 5 is what message am I going to carry? Our steps end with this awesome, beautiful thing that this is about practicing. I carry my message by practicing these principles in everything that I think, say, and do. Everything. That's how our steps end, with practice. But I carry a message by practice, by trying to ask God, show me the way of patience and tolerance and kindness and love. Show me the way, because this self-centered, self-obsessed thing is not going to come up with patience and tolerance and kindness and love. I think it's impossible. I can't say to my mind, be patient, be tolerant. It just doesn't happen from this thing. That's not what it thinks about. But if I can ask my creator to mold my ideals and help me live up to them, um, then I got a shot at doing it. And if I listen to what I get, and then if I try to put that into play, that's humbly relying on God and trying to live the life God wants me to live. Okay, I'm going to stop so we can have some open discussion. And next week we'll continue on with these other 5 characteristics and relate them to this whole thing. Thank you very much for your attention.